Hey, everybody, and welcome back to The Overlay, a poker podcast brought to you by CCG Poker Radio. I'm on the horn with Brandon, my co-host, the co-hostess with the mostess.
That's right. That's me. I feel like this is like 3 weeks in a row now. I've been back. It almost feels like we're back in the groove of doing this.
Yeah, it's like when the Beatles played on top of that building in New York. Well, that was the end. Then I don't think they ever got back together. So we'd have to find.
It took us 30 seconds to get a fail.
Yeah, it's not bad. We this is episode 25, so a couple of updates for the podcast. This is episode 25, which is kind of crazy. 25 episodes in about 3 months. I think we started at the end of May, right?
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
Kind of a month before we started back up at CCG, maybe 6 weeks. So anyways, 25 episodes. We just got over 3,000 downloads this week. I just got the email today, so that's pretty dope. Pretty excited, so thank you. As always, if you are listening to this episode or you listen to any of the Overlay, please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. It really increases our searchability. Is that a word, Brandon?
Searchability is a word.
It improves our searchability, our SEO, our search engine optimization. So it would be great if you guys could do that. We've had a couple people leave actual reviews. If you just hit 5 stars, that's cool too. If you want to write us out a review, that's even more helpful. We would greatly appreciate it. Any ideas, shout out some tweets. Our Twitter handle is @theoverlay_pod. That's enough for all the information. What are we going to talk about today, Brando? Episode 25.
The Art of Straddling.
Ooh, the Art of Straddling. I told Brandon to think of a name, and I want to get like all the funny straddle jokes out, like, haha, straddle me. I couldn't think of anything else really funny, but that's the best I could come up with. My job was to come up with a dirty straddle joke. Your job was to come up with the episode title.
Which I did.
Yeah.
Art of Straddling.
The Art of the Straddle. So we're going to talk about cash games and straddling and when it's cool, when it's not cool, the different types of straddles, because when you start writing them down, there's a lot. Different variations of a straddle. And can you give me just the most basic form of a straddle, what that means and how it applies to the game?
Yeah. So if you're under the gun, you can straddle, which you are basically putting out a third blind, where it'll be double the big blind.
Correct.
Usually. So if we're playing 1-3, it'll be a $6 straddle.
Correct.
And basically you buy the ability to act last.
Pre-flop. Right. Because after the flop, everything goes back to normal.
You're putting out a third blind, and then the action starts then with the new under the gun, which is really the under the gun +1.
Right.
But because you've straddled, they are the new under the gun. And it runs all the way around through the button, small blind, big blind, and then you.
Correct. So it's a third blind. You become the second big blind, and you just up the stakes on the whole game, right?
Correct.
Because now that one of the blinds are now 1-3 with a $6 straddle, now you're playing a much bigger game than 1-3.
Right.
I mean, the game just effectively got bigger, and that's ultimately why people straddle, right? Is to make the game play bigger. Let's not get into yet if that actually works, but the idea is that you're going to create a bigger pot because everybody has to now call $6 in our example. So if you normally are getting 3 to 4 callers every flop, that would normally only be what, $12 in a 1-3 game, and now you're talking about it would be double that, $24.
Right, and also
the flop bets are bigger, the turn bets are bigger, the river bets are bigger because there's more money in the
pre-flop raises are also bigger,
right?
Because a standard raise in 1-3 is about $12. Well, now the minimum raise is $12,
right? Which means you're really looking at 18 to 25 is now the new
people
open.
Are going to open to 20,
right? Oh yeah, I said 25. I was thinking 20.
I mean, maybe 25.
I'm a big fan of straddle. When I'm playing a cash game, I straddle almost every single hand. Every single time I can.
Definitely drives up the action.
Yeah. I mean, that's always ultimately what I feel like I'm trying to drive action, because I'm just an action junkie. I want to get in there, get it going. Right. So straddle. It's when under the gun puts out a third blind and he gets action pre-flop on that blind, just like a regular big blind would. So you're turning the big blind now into a second small blind, and you become the big blind. Yeah?
Yep. That's a good way to describe it.
Cool. Now, let's start throwing some variations out there. Now that we know what a basic straddle is what's the most common changearoo, switcheroo variation on a straddle is the button straddle.
Yes.
All right, so now let's get into the button straddle rabbit hole because there's a couple of things that are going on here. So instead of under the gun being on the straddle, now the button can do a straddle as well. Because typically a straddle by definition is just under the gun, no other place available. That's a straddle. When you allow button straddles, that means you could do it from under the gun, but you can also do it from the button. You can straddle, become a blind on the button, which is a significantly better place to put in extra money than, say, under the gun. Yeah?
Right. So let's first get with the formality of it. It will, so if you button straddle, the action will then start usually with the small blind. So the button straddle is now the under the gun, and I'm air quoting. And now that you run through the blinds all the way back around the table to the button where he has the last action.
On the button, he's getting last action every single which way, every street. It does cause a significant amount of confusion because instead of the actual under the gun player going, so again, let's just stick with our 1-3 blinds. Small blinds 1, big blinds 3. The person on the button is now making it 6 from the button. And now that there is a button straddle out, you're going to go immediately to the small blind will have first action, which kind of throws everybody off. Yeah.
It throws off the under the gun player because he's used to just looking at 7 deuce and instantly folding because he's under the gun and he's
calling out of turn or raising out of turn. It causes a little bit of, so you have to get a game where people understand the rules of
Plus the small blind gets a little sleepy because the small blind usually the whole table goes around before you act.
Right.
And all of a sudden it's like, yo, it's on you, bud. You're first. Let's go.
Yeah, none of that stuff matters.
Oh, button straddle.
Right.
So you kind of have to be way more aware of it because it really does change the whole dynamic of the game, which we will probably get into here shortly.
Yeah,
but
for a good reason. I mean, it's like taking all of the negative things about being the straddle from under the gun is that typically everybody who calls you is going to be in a better position than you, right?
Right.
So you're putting in extra money blind. You don't get to see your cards before doing so. You're only getting, the position on the player's pre-flop. After that, now you got to play a bigger hand from a worse position.
With more money.
More money out there. 90% of the time, 85% of the time. I mean, how often? I mean, the only times that you're going to come up on a regular straddle and be a bonus is if the small blind or the big blind are the only ones that are calling you.
All right, it's got to fold through the button, which
Correct.
Rarely happens in a cash game.
It's not. I mean, it's not likely. I would say 90% of the time, I'm pretty comfortable with that number. You are going to be playing a big pot out of position. Which, if I told you pre-flop or before the cards are even dealt, I'm going to go, you're going to play a big pot out of position. What do you think about that? And you'd go, yeah, that sounds bad. Like
with probably
with not premium cards.
Yeah, without premium cards.
Because, I mean, again, you're just getting lucky. I mean, you're taking 2 random cards. I'm going to give you 2 random cards. You're going to be out of position and play a big pot. What do you want to do? I'll pass. I don't think that sounds great at all.
Right. So, in general, straddling from under the gun is pretty negative EV. Like
it's negative EV. It's fun for the person.
For the person.
Right. Positive EV on the fun side. Game. Right. It's fun.
And that's why
fun EV?
Fun EV. That's good. Yeah. It's fun EV. And also, that's why a lot of times people want to straddle. They won't straddle because the other people aren't straddling. And it's like, well, hey, if I'm taking my turn, posting out a negative EV for the good of the game,
correct,
like you should do the same for the good of the game.
And a lot of guys and girls, I shouldn't say guys, a lot of people who play will start a game and they'll say, hey, let's do 1-3. Let's do an automatic straddle, especially when you start getting late in the night. And I'm saying late in the evening because the games are getting smaller in the sense of there's less players, right? So now pre-COVID, that would be like a 6 or 7 handed table. Now post-COVID, we're talking about, 4 or 5 handed. You start throwing in a mandatory straddle, which is cool because now you're just playing 3 blinds. The game really opens up. And again, go back to our episode where we talked about shorthanded play, it's actually a bonus. The under the gun actually becomes your new hijacker cutoff position because of the fact that there's only 4 players. Now the straddle's kind of great from under the gun, right?
Right.
So you got to think about those things. That was episode 20. GTO gameplay for shorthanded cash games and tournaments.
How do you have these like titles just up?
I actually have the website up so I can just look at it. Because
okay,
I'm
like
no
scared.
idea.
I'm like, well, I've never listened to any of these.
I want again when we reference an episode, I'd like people to have an idea of what the number is and where they can find it. So straddle, button straddle. Let's go to a Mississippi straddle now. Let's leave the button straddle for a second. There are some more stuff that we want to talk about.
I love the button straddle.
Button straddle's bonus. If a game allows a button straddle, 1,000% I'm going to straddle on the button every single time. Because
everybody should.
The stuff that you talked about, it's negative EV when you're out of position. Now you are always in position. You're going to play a bigger pot. Granted, you're not sure what the cards are going to be, but hey, I've got 2 out of 3 things that I really want. Position, big pot, 2 random cards. I'll take that scenario. Give me random cards out of position and a big pot and be like, ugh, I don't know. That all seems bad. So straddle, maybe not great. Button straddle, meh, I like it. 100%. You should do it every time. All right, what is a Mississippi straddle, Barando?
See, I don't know this one. This is like
I did go to school in Mississippi, so I am a little bit more of the aforementioned expert on a Mississippi straddle. Technically, a Mississippi straddle, when I played in Mississippi at the rooms down in Tunica, they do a Mississippi straddle, which is anybody can straddle from any position, obviously not the small blind, big blind, at any point. It works backwards from the button. So the option, and it's something we didn't talk about with the button, because when you do a button straddle, somebody can still straddle from under the gun. It's just the preference or what's the word I'm looking for here?
Precedent.
The precedent is the button straddle gets first option, under the gun gets second option. Nobody else gets an option to straddle in a button straddle game. In a Mississippi straddle game, the button gets first option, and then it goes backwards from there. Meaning now the cutoff, the hijack, middle position, all the way up to the under the gun can do it. But if any person who's got position on them decides to do the straddle, they get the precedent to do it.
So if under the gun +1, he's just like straddling every hand because like he's just the guy who's straddling every hand. He puts out a straddle, but then the button puts out the straddle too.
He can take it away from him.
One guy has to just take it back.
Correct. Yeah, exactly. He loses the ability to Mississippi straddle. So the idea of a Mississippi straddle is one player in the game can straddle every single hand from every position except the button and except the big blind, small blind area because you can't straddle your own blind. That's the idea.
So that's fun. So that's like guys that are just like, well, I want to bump up some action.
So for a perfect example of this one, I was playing at the Golden Nugget. I think that's what it was called. Not the Golden Nugget. Was it the Golden Nugget? I don't know. It was in Mississippi. Golden Nugget, I think. That doesn't sound right. I'm stuck on it. I can't get past it. Anyways, I was playing in Tunica. They were playing a 1-2 no limit game that had like a $50 minimum buy-in, maybe $100, with no cap. It was the silliest game I ever played.
That sounds fun.
And this guy, I want to say he was from Texas, but that might just be 20 years now. I mean, I was 22 when I played in that game, so it's 18 years ago. In my mind, I don't know if the guy is just transformed into like this Texas oil tycoon, and that's why he was doing this. But this guy came in, I kid you not, in a 1-2 game. Everybody's sitting with like the big stack's like $600, right? It's just a normal 1-2 game. Nothing out of the ordinary. And this cat comes and sits down, I think from Texas, bought in for $10,000. If you are screaming, I have a small male appendage, that is how you do it. You buy into a 1-2 game where all of the money on the table roughly adds up to about what? $2,500, $2,000?
Yeah, $3,000 at the most.
$3K tops. And you just rip buy-in for $10K. Then it's a Mississippi straddle game. So he legitimately straddled from every single position. Now, the nice thing for me is I was sitting immediately to his right. So it was cool. Like he had position on me, but I was always the second to last act pre-flop. So it was great. Like everybody, he would be the straddle, and there'd be a bunch of raises that I could get in. It was awesome. Like I was in such a good spot. I could see everybody else's moves pre-flop except his, but
you didn't have to put in any of the money to straddle, but you almost got the position of the straddler every time.
Correct. I got the position of the straddle every time pre-flop it was awesome. So it was super cool. It was such a good spot. It was such a good game. I think I ran my $200 buy-in up to like 2,000 at that time where I was and what was going on in the world. That was like the biggest score I'd ever had. Yeah, it was by far the largest cash game winner I'd had in like one session. It was super cool. It was great. So that's a Mississippi straddle. You can straddle from any position. Obviously, the precedent goes from the button reverse.
And then obviously it just starts to the left of the straddle.
Always starts to the left of the straddle. That's right. So like this guy was sitting to my left. I got to basically act last minus him. It was cool. Yeah. So it gave me a good, basically pre-flop, I was always in the small blind position, which was fine. You get to see what goes down. And if I had a big hand, I knew I was going to get paid off on it because I'm sitting and waiting for everybody to try to get and he was just pissing everybody off because he's just dumping money into this game left and right.
Yeah.
It was fun, though. It was super great. Okay, so that's a Mississippi straddle. Variation number 4. Let's talk about The Rock.
Sweet.
Also one of my favorite movies of all time.
Never seen it.
You need to stop this podcast right now and go watch The Rock. I think it's on Netflix.
Is Dwayne Johnson in it?
No. Sean Connery's in it. And Nicolas Cage. It's one of my favorite lines. He's like, I'm trying my best. He's like, losers try their best. Winners go home and F the prom queen. But it's way cooler when Sean Connery says it because he's like, winners go home and... I can't do a Sean Connery accent, but it's really, really funny. It's a great line. I say that all the time to people. I'm trying my best. Losers try their best. Winners go home and, yeah, the prom queen. And then Nicolas Cage gets all mad. He's like, my wife was the prom queen. Anyways, it's cool. The Rock. What is the actual Rock? I have never played this variation of a straddle, and it's something I think is super cool.
Either. This is more of like a Florida and Vegas and California type thing.
So what is The Rock?
The Rock is just like let's just say they're playing 2-5 for the easiness of The Rock. The Rock is the $10 straddle, but it's in every pot, and then the winner of the pot just becomes the straddler for the next hand. So it's like if you win the pot, it's like you win the button, you win the button type of. It's the same thing. If you win the pot, you are now the $10 straddler of the next hand.
You get the right to straddle, but you don't get an option. If you're playing the Rock variation, you put that $10 out.
So the Rock is usually like a $5 chip and 5 whites or 10 whites that are just rubber banded together, and they just like stay rubber banded together, and it's just like it's really never in anybody's stack because as soon as somebody wins it,
you just put it in the next pot. It's just an indication, a marker of where that whomever's going to get the last action pre-flop. Now explain it to me how it works for pre-flop action. So it's kind of like a half Mississippi straddle. It's just you can straddle from anywhere except you're using the same $10.
Yeah.
But doesn't the action change?
No, the action's the same. We mixed that up when we talked about it.
Okay, earlier. I got you. So that's another variation.
It's the same. It's basically a forced Mississippi straddle.
I got you.
But it's always in there.
If you're the big blind, do you put out your big blind and put the Rock out?
No, it's the Rock.
The Rock takes place of your big blind. Okay.
Yeah, and same thing with the small blind.
And again, now you're just basically, when you're playing a 2-5 game with a $10 Rock, you're now playing in a 5-10 game. Like, that's just what you're playing.
Right, because the blind, it's never not 10 to call.
Mm-hmm. And the opening raises are going to be what, 30, 35?
Correct.
Yeah, not a normal 2-5 game, which is great. Again, straddles create action. If there's anything in the world that will create action, start straddling.
So the good thing about the Rock is that it is forced, where it's like
You don't have an
you
option.
don't have this like all player decision where this guy's straddling every time and this guy's never straddling and taking advantage of the table and this guy's only straddling when he's drunk, and it's just like, no, there's gonna be a straddle every hand. We just don't know where it's gonna be from.
Right.
So it's so it's basically 5-10. Yeah, it is fun. It's very fun.
Even though neither one of us have played it, it sounds like a fun game. Like, I want to play in that game.
Yeah, I was talking to a kid last night who was playing 5-5 with a $10 rock at.
Who is that?
My buddy Ben plays at the Horseshoe, but
oh, nice.
Tell
the Jordan story really fast.
Oh yeah, so Jordan was
episode
playing...
7. Guest Jordan, who's a 2-time WSOP ring champion. Fire away. He's playing the rock in Vegas, right?
I think it was Commerce.
Okay, even better.
Or the other one. What's the other one? It's not the big hotel. It's just the
bike
room. The bike.
Yep.
So one of those two.
He's playing Commerce or the bike. It's pretty cool in general.
It was like 5-5-10, the same game I was just talking about, PLO. Mm-hmm. And like he like wins the first spot.
Sits down, wins the first hand.
And like scoops the pot, and it's just like, what asshole rubber banded these chips up, or like something like that. And he takes the rubber band out and takes rubber bands the chips and puts them in his pot or in his stack.
Right.
And everybody at the table's like, dude, what are you doing, man? He's like, these chips were rubber banded. They're like, no, this is the rock. Like, he's like, oh, like this just like stays like this. Like, right. Oh, like, so he didn't really understand what he was playing. And of course he
understands the game of PLO. He did not understand the idea of this rock and how the money is really just a marker for who's going to be the next straddle. It's just juicing up the game, which I think is hilarious because the guys.
The question is, here's the real question, and if you're very smart, you probably are thinking like me because I'm also very smart.
Self-proclaimed.
Who puts out the first rock? Is it just the guy who's under the gun the first hand? He's just out $10 the whole game.
Ooh, that's awesome. How do you start the rock game?
Obviously, the casino doesn't put out the $10.
Nah, they ain't gonna put out the $10. Or if you're playing like a 9-handed game, does just everybody put in $9, and then the guy who's under the gun puts in the extra $1?
See, like these are the questions.
Like that's kind of cool. Idea. I would be down with that. Oh, we're gonna play the rock. Cool. Everybody throwing $1. All right, there's 7 of us. There's $7. Okay, the under the gun guy gets screwed for the extra $3. That's just the way it goes.
Or
like, at least you're not taking the full hit.
Or does the casino take it out of the thing because they just get it back at the end? See, I
gotcha. I guess they could just it's legitimately just a fake marker. At that point, why use chips? Why not just use a rock?
Like an actual just rock.
Yeah, like a rock. Like go into the parking lot, find a rock, write the rock on it. On the bottom, you write smell what the rock's cooking, and then that's it. Just have a rock. That would be awesome. Or like a bobblehead. You could use anything at that point. I mean, I think they used the $10 in chips because then people don't get confused about what it actually is, but that's correct. Super funny. You're right. Who the hell pays that original $10 and then it just stays in there? And then what happens if you're the last hand of the night? Do you get to win that $10 because there's no more rock?
Who knows?
It's kind of nuts. I mean, these are the questions that people want to know in the Art of the Straddle episode. After the rock, we've got a couple of variations. Those are really all of the straddles that we are aware of. Obviously, if you know,
there's one more.
Oh, there is one more.
It's just like it's a variation. Excuse me. It's just like an uncapped straddle where you can straddle up to X amount of dollars because they do that at Horseshoe Joliet.
I was referring to this being like those are the types of straddles, and now let's get into a couple of variations. One variation is sometimes the straddle can be up to a certain amount. Like the 2-5 game here at CCG, they do a up to 20 on the button, which means you could straddle for up to $20 from the button.
You can straddle for 5, for 10, for 15, or 20.
If it's a 2-5 game, you could do 10, 15, or 20. Right. PLO, in the old days, they used to do uncapped button straddles. I remember the super old days where, player X would put out $100 on the button, and it's just like you've just imploded this game that was already super, super juicy and crazy and turned it into river bingo, which I'm fine with sometimes. You're just doing flips at that point.
Right.
Problem is the guys who have more money win in flips more often because they're willing to continue to flip.
Yep. If you don't have much money, you got to win the first one or the second one.
That's the GTO of flipping. Have enough money to continue to stay in the game until you get even or win all the money out there. GTO, if you have no money, get in on one, win, and get out. Run away.
Right. Don't keep playing.
Don't keep playing. Don't be like, I'm giving.
Because that's what the guys with money want you
The
to
guys
do.
with money will always put you out there, and they're like, oh, come on, man, give us a chance to win our money back. That just means I've got you. You're never leaving. I'm going to take all of the money in your pocket, and it's great. As a person who has washed out an entire crowd of table, I have cracked an entire table before of PLO that we went from a full 9-handed game down to Ken won every single nickel on the table because at the end we were just doing flips and I will do enough to make it worthwhile, and I won the whole table. Everything was mine. It's great.
So you won the tournament of the cash game.
I won the tournament cash game. I should have taken my picture and put it on the champions wall, which we don't have, but we should. All right, cool. So that would be the no limit on the button straddle. Typically doesn't happen from under the gun straddles. Not like people are going to, although I guess it could, because like in a PLO game, when you do a button straddles up to 25 in a 1-2-5 game, theoretically you could straddle for 25 from under the gun then too, right?
Yep.
And which is weird. Not as a valuable position, but certainly something the action junkies will do. All right,
so I think Harris Joliet is 1-2 game straddle from anywhere up to, I want to say like 10 big blinds or something. So you can straddle up to 20 anywhere in the game.
Wow.
Which really changed the entire game from a 1-2 game.
It's not a 1-2 game. It's something that people...
Well, it's very dependent on who's there, though. Sometimes it's a 1-2 game because nobody's straddling.
That's 100% true. You get a bunch of nits and it just plays like a regular 1-2 game. You get a bunch of wild guys that are just playing for action. That's a much bigger game. Let's talk about Ultimate Last Action, which you had said is a variation that they play at Caesar's Palace in Las Vegas.
Yes.
So Ultimate Last Action. Give me a rundown what that is, because I have trouble understanding this one, and I want you to kind of give us a hand breakdown of what Ultimate Last Action means. Go ahead.
So it's a button straddle,
mm-hmm.
and then instead of the action starting with the small blind and big blind like we addressed earlier,
mm-hmm.
It starts with under the gun, like always.
Right. The action, it's the normal game semantics are the same. So small blind, big blind, there's a straddle on the button, but we are going to ignore that at the moment and start with under the gun like we normally would. So action pursues, and then what happens?
And then it gets around to the button, and it skips the button, and then goes to the blinds.
He doesn't act.
And then, right. So it gets to the cutoff, and the cutoff does whatever, and it hops over the button, the small blind acts, the big blind acts, and then the button acts.
So it's like you get ultimate last action. Now, when it gets really funky is when there's a three-way pot and there's a couple of raises. So let's say under the gun plus 2 raises, you get one caller, skips over the button, goes to the small blind who 3-bets him, makes it, whatever, makes it another raise. Then it would go to the person who originally raised, back to the other guy, and then it could skip him again
it doesn't skip him again.
Okay.
This is where it gets kind of funky. It would skip him the first time, but then the second time, it's not like he has to face every like raise.
So my question is, let's say
you can't have the straddle in and then be able to put in 70 without putting in the first 20.
I got you. So like if under the gun raised, cutoff raises, goes back to small blind, he calls, the cutoffs raise, we skip the button, then it would go back to the guy in the middle there, he re-raises. At that point you would face it because you got skipped the first time, but that's really the only time where you could see 2 raises without having to make an action.
I think if there's 2 raises, it's just on you. I think if under the gun raises the 20,
it goes back to him.
So the cutoff raises the 70.
The last action hero here is a difficult game to play because if the button straddle already screws up when people start because the small blind acts first, and that's really unorthodox and not normal, and people have a hard time getting used to it unless you're used to playing that game. Like when I play PLO, like we're so used to a button straddle, I almost act out of turn on the small blind when there isn't a button straddle because I'm so it's like I reverse it. I'm screwing up, acting out of turn because I'm like, oh, I'm small blind. I gotta go first because most people will do the button straddle in a PLO game.
Yes.
But Ultimate Last Action is a very cool variation where you ultimately get to see more action than normal. We're not exactly sure how the raise, re-raise, or 3-bet works, but it's all right.
I'm pretty sure that if you're facing 2 raises, it's on you.
It goes back to you.
Like I said, if the under the gun makes it 20 and then the cutoff makes it 70, it's not like it skips you.
Right.
Like you got to act on that 70.
Oh, I got you. If under the gun raises to 20, cutoff makes it 70, it doesn't skip you and go to the small blind.
Correct.
You're facing 2 raises, which means your last action's gone. It's just regular action.
Whereas if the under the gun makes it 20 and the cutoff calls the 20,
then it would skip you,
goes to the small blind 20,
then the big blind
calls 20,
then you. That's the benefit of the last action. At that point, now there would be up to $80 in the pot, and you could then make your action based on the 80 versus you're going to see if the small blind, big blind are going to call or fold, which is kind of
exactly. So if we can like get into why that variation exists,
go ahead.
It's because like, unlike under the gun action where it's negative EV for the person and good for the game, button straddle is honestly close to the opposite, where it's positive EV for the person and negative EV for the game, because the blinds always have to act first. So the blinds in general play much tighter, which in general is bad for the game. Whereas in the straddle under the gun, the blinds have now seen all this action around, and they're going to be more incentivized to call 20 or call 15.
Correct.
Because they're getting such good juicy pot odds, where now the buttons, the blinds are playing looser, and those are the people that are out of position playing looser. Like, that's good for the game. Whereas the button straddle, it's blinds are playing out of position and tighter, so they're not playing. Well, now all of a sudden it turns more into not a tournament, but it turns more into position and opening ranges based on position, and not just splashing around because there's good pot odds, where those blinds really, really do that and drive the action in the game. Whereas now this ultimate last action skips those blinds, so those blinds still get to play as loose as ever, but the straddle still gets the last action. So it's kind of the best of both worlds,
where you take the negatives from each side of a straddle versus a button straddle. The last action, ultimate last action, kind of negates both of those, where you're still allowing, which I like, because button straddles are great, and I'm a big proponent of it because, again, it's a huge benefit to the player. You get to put in more money from the best position, always a good idea. But, again, it does screw up the game a little bit, and you're right. It almost kind of defeats action because you don't have those forced bets in there. They're less likely to call or do anything weird. Because how many times are you on the button in a cash game, under the gun raises to 15 or whatever in a 1-2 game, and 4 guys call, and you're looking down at 8-9 suited, going, well, I normally wouldn't play this for a big pot, but screw it. I mean, I'm closing the action. It's easy to go and go from there. Take that same idea where, the guy straddled from the button. You're probably not calling with that because you don't know how much money you're going to have to put in, right?
Yes.
So that's a perfect example.
9-8 suited when you're on.
I always say 8-9. We talked about this on the commentary for YouTube.
That's so stupid.
Relax there, dog. Or I know somebody who's going to be on garbage duty for the rest of the week.
Whatever. You're going to be out of town.
I always say 8-9 suited, and you always like, dummy, it's 9-8 suited. So, folks, can you please settle this argument between Brandon and I?
Do you say Jack 10 or you say 10 Jack?
Well, that's different. I'm talking about under face cards.
Do you say 10-9 or 9-10?
Under values of 10 cards.
Oh, so you say 4?
I would say 8-9 suited, but I would also say 10-9 suited.
Right, because 10-9 suited makes sense.
But 8-9 suited seems more relevant to me. 2-3 suited, not 3-2 suited. I don't know. That's just
2-3 suited.
2-3
Okay,
suited.
what about if we put a gap in there really quick? You have 7-9. It would be 9-7 suited.
Oh no, I would 100% say 7-9.
7-9.
I know, it's crazy. All right, last deal for the straddle episode is a thing that I get a lot. I get a question of this a lot, and it's the restraddle. Is there a thing called a restraddle, Brando?
No.
Some games play it where they'll do but you don't actually get action on the bet, right? So it happens so many times where people are playing in a 1-2 game, and the straddle typically in a 1-2 game will be rounded up to $5, right?
So apparently, what Poker News' article on straddling says that you can re-straddle in the Mississippi straddle variant.
Really? And get action.
It says any player can straddle as long as they do it before the cards are dealt. And obviously, you said it's in order of precedent based on the button going backwards.
Correct.
And then the next sentence is, as long as they do it, before the cards are dealt. If no one re-straddles, and then it says in parentheses, yes, that's possible in this variation.
Wow.
The player who places the straddle bet is the last one to act before the flop, which is obviously because you start to the left of it and go around. And
correct. And he closes out the action.
But so would the re-straddle be backwards?
What do you mean?
Like
that's funny.
Say the right, like if the button wants to, or let's say the cutoff wants to straddle to $10, and then somebody wants to re-straddle. Is it the button to his left that gets the re-straddle, or the hijack to his right that gets the re-straddle?
No, I mean it's got to go to the left like normal action. If you're allowing him to be the straddle from middle position, and then you're the button, you could re-straddle from the button.
Okay,
and get action.
Now he's just ha ha ha.
And again, it still starts to your left. Yeah, this is when it gets weird. But in a normal straddle game, there's no re-straddle.
It's a blind raise. You're not going to get.
You don't get action on it. Right, an option's a better word.
So if it's 1-3, and then the guy straddles to 6, like the guy can make it 12 or 10 if he wants to, which is legal.
But you don't get an option on that. 12.
You don't get an option.
It's just a raise.
Yes, you're blind raising.
Which means the next guy to his left is going to make it, call 12 or raise, which is different. The Art of Straddle. So many different straddle games. As always, guys, let us know if you know of any different games. Because, I mean, in all honesty, these are how these games start, right? Like it's somebody's home game that starts doing let's make a straddle that goes here, and then this happens when this happens, and blah 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 blah. I mean, this is exactly the way it goes, and then eventually those games work their way into a casino and possibly a tournament, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's how poker works. I don't know if that still happens, but it could.
It's like the order of operations.
Yep. Start in a home game and move your way up.
I really think that we should implement the last action in our games.
Yeah, we're gonna have a little bit of time for people to listen to this and figure out exactly.
in the big games, in the games where we're allowed to button straddle.
Oh yeah, if you allow button straddle, it should be last action. That way, it's just the order of operation always starts the same. Yeah, you start with under the gun, rip it as normal, skip over to button, small blind, big blind, call, raise, or fold. Then the button gets to act at the very end. So if everybody limps in, he gets to see it. If there's one raise, that raise skips over him, goes to small blind, big blind, and then he gets to make his action. The only time you don't get the ultimate last action, we have decided, is when there's a raise and a re-raise. At that point, once the 3-bet hits the floor, the action is just going to go normal. So
yes,
I think it's cool. Straddle is, are you giving it a thumbs up or a thumbs down in general? Straddling.
Thumbs up.
Yeah, I give it a thumbs up. I think straddling is great for the game.
100% straddling on the button and
yes,
50 to 80% straddling under the gun.
So here's a funny situation. Let's say you're playing PLO and there's a guy who's not button straddling, and you happen to be under the gun on his button. Are you basically going straddle, big blind, small blind, button straddle?
Depends on who it is. If it's like a tight guy that I think is just taking advantage of it because he knows that I'm going to straddle for him, I'm not going to do it. But if it's just like
a noob,
somebody who usually straddles and he's just like stuck or tired or doesn't want to, it's very going to be player dependent. Or if I'm super stuck, I'm just going to straddle.
Yeah, I'm normally stuck, so I'm just ripping it at all times.
And then when you're not stuck, you're like, I'll splash around.
Nice. For sure. Yeah, I can justify it any which way. One way or the other, I'm going to justify getting a straddle in there. Well, that's going to do it for the Art of the Straddle, episode 25 from The Overlay. Make sure you, again, subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts. Leave us a review. Written reviews are always best, but it's so simple to just scroll down to the bottom and click that 5th star and give us a 5-star review. Again, it helps with searchability. It helps us get noticed, and we would love you very much for it. So, Brandon, exit us out of today's game. Ultimate last action. Brandon, what are you doing?
Oh, man.
You're supposed to say goodbye. Farewell.
I know, but I was
Raise,
really trying to come up with like a straddle you later or something.
Yeah, straddle you later. Oh, that's gross. Okay, cool. Straddle you later, everybody. Straddle episode from Brandon and Ken. Bye.